When it comes to growing the profit margin in your company, most people think it's just a math game. You raise the price, you get the costs down, you sell more of the profitable thing. And that's true, it's math, and it's very important that the math is accurate. But those mathematical numbers are only half of the process. There are levers underneath those numbers, and they're not numbers at all, actually. Those levers are decisions that somebody has to make, steps that need to be written down and put out into a repeatable process, updates that need to be communicated and then systematically rolled out across the business. And when that part doesn't happen, you end up asking yourself, on paper, the math worked. So why didn't this year work? Hi, I'm Sarah Paikai, and I've spent over 15 years building operations for companies, a decade of that as a COO of an 8-figure company. And I've worked with businesses doing 5, 6, 7, 8 figures in revenue every year. So I have seen it all, and that is not an exaggeration. Today, I'm going to walk you through the 8 levers that actually influence how profit is made and kept within a company. So I'm going to share my screen here. And in a previous video, I talked about what each of these digital Post-its mean. The overarching reminder that I want to give you is you don't have to do them all in any particular order, but the blues have to be done first before the yellows. And both blues have to be done first before the yellows. And both yellows have to be done before you call it a day and you say that you finished. And this is a process that I use to systemize intellectual property. So I'm going to go into the key process types today, which is basically looking at what types of processes need to exist to increase, to make, and to keep a profit margin within a company. Now, the percentages that you see on the screen are not like the percentages of revenue or money or time that have to be devoted. That's not any of these things. This is not based off of a budget. The percentages exist to show the weight, W-E-I-G-H-T, the heaviness, the weight of how important each of these types of processes are and how strongly they contribute to profit margin and to making and keeping a healthy profit margin within a company. So there are there's many types of processes, but there are 3 types of processes that specifically contribute to the profit margin of the company. And those are processes for your creators, the processes for guardrails, and the processes for expansion, right? And I'm going to cover each of the types in just a little bit. But I want to point out something that often happens when people are thinking about scale, when they're thinking about growth, when they're thinking about increase, and how CEOs and or even sometimes consultants and or operators, we're also guilty of that, how we approach this. A lot of times when you're thinking about growing your company, you are really thinking about expansion. You're thinking about how do I grow bigger and more than just this. So it could be if you own a store, it could be how can I have more locations? If you own an agency, how can I get more workers, more team and more client coming through, more work being produced? If you have sometimes even if you have a brick and mortar and you're like a service-based businesses, you might just think, how do I triple my customers? You might even think a little bit more abstract than that. How do I double my revenue, right? Like things like that. This is the type of things that I hear, and that's not uncommon with CEOs and business owners when we think about expansion and growth and processes and how do you really grow the company. But you can see here that expansion, only those processes for expansion, the things that they think about that they have to get done and document and set up and do, those things only contribute to 13%. Like it's a very small percentage of really what types of processes make up overarching profit margin. It's a very, very small sector inside of what is important to focus on when you're thinking about really expanding your profit margin and growing your revenue. Okay. So I'm going to go through the types of processes one at a time of what exists. And I'm going to go from the most important ones down to the ones that are the least important. And by important, every single one of them are important. I'm talking about the amount of instant impact that it can have inside of your company today. Like if you wrote this today, what's the probability? Like which ones are the strongest ones that will then by tomorrow, next week, a month from now, start to create the type of increase that you want to see in your company. So the first one here is a process around setting the cost of goods sold and the cost of delivery. It is very, very, very important. This is the most of all the processes that you can have when you're thinking about how to create more profit and create more profit margin. The most important one is how your internal philosophy, right? Your internal formulas, your internal checklist, your process, your steps that you do of how you calculate and set cost of goods sold. So if you are in a business where you have materials that are being used, or you're actually selling products, or having products and merchandise or materials that you need to purchase to fulfill your services are a large part of how you do your work. The setting of that cost, that's cost of goods, okay? Setting of how much you pay for those items that you then repurpose into cash for you is the most important. If you're like, Sarah, I don't have any of those things. I am a coach or a consultant or, something else that doesn't require actual inventory. Then your cost of delivery. What does it cost you to deliver this service? How many hours does it take for you or a team member? What kind of technologies do you need to deliver this to the client? Things of that nature, okay? So that's the most of all the processes that you can look at. Of all the processes you can look at when you're thinking about how to increase profit margin in your company, how you set the cost of goods sold or the cost of delivery is the strongest one. The next one is customer acquisition. How do you acquire new clients? What are the step-by-step things that you have to do in order to make sure that you get enough people who are interested and looking at your business and inquiring and or applying and or that you're reaching out to and that they're saying, yes, they're interested in a sales call, in a free trial, in a demo, and getting an invoice or an estimate or walking into your store, right? What is the process that you do, the processes that you use in order to get new clients? That's the second strongest process that you can have documented to contribute to profit. The third one is team production. How the team actually goes about, and you are also included in the team. So if you're like, hey, it's mostly me and I'm doing all this stuff, great. That's also you, then I'm also speaking to you. But how the team goes about actually delivering the work that fulfills what you sold to your clients or customers, and how they do that day over day, month over month, year over year. The next one after that is KPI management. KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator. And it's basically saying, as the team is doing their work and they're producing their work, what are the metrics that they should be hitting? Because you can do an entire checklist. I could do a whole checklist. I could go into a bakery tomorrow and look at, let's say they have a checklist of 20 things to do for the opening shift. And I could do every single one of those things and just follow the checklist exactly and still not hit the outcome that they want to see. And early days of young Sarah's career, I worked in a food business. I worked in retail. I was a customer service representative. And so I've got a little bit still left in the tank where I could fake it. I could do everything in the checklist and probably did pretty decently and open the bakery for business. It doesn't mean that I've hit any of the things that would constitute as success by the person who's hired me to not just open there like, yeah, we need you to do this opening shift, but what are those metrics? How do I know that I've had a successful opening shift? How do I know I've had a successful shift? How do I know I've had enough successful shifts where I've had a successful month? And then how about not just for me, but the baker in the kitchen and the supervisor, the general manager for the store, or the shift supervisor, or anything, right? How do we know? What are the metrics that we're tracking that shows as a team member, I'm doing my job successfully? So this is the fourth most important one to really process, to really go through to determine profit, growing your profit. So either growing the amount of revenue that you're making and keeping, and the profit margin, like how much does it actually cost to deliver this versus what you're taking home and putting in the bank at the end of the day. A lot of people think, oh, we just have to give trainings and handbooks and you explain to people how to do it and you get them to repeat back to you and they're doing a good job. Amazing. But what's the math? What's the math that allows them to go, I know that I did my job right. And also I did it in a way that hit these particular metrics. That's how you should also know as well. KPI management is really, really, really important for the growth of the company as a whole. It is impossible to get better quality results, better quality work, better quality decisions, accurate decisions, even sometimes, accurate work sometimes, without giving your team metrics to follow. And if you're like, Sarah, I do a lot of the work myself too, it's not just then you too, you also need metrics to know what that's supposed to look like in math. Okay, I'm soapboxing. I'll stop. But this is really, really important. And I think it's a key crucial point that people don't understand. They feel like if they just keep explaining more words, that they'll get the context. And that's true. Maybe people do need to hear more and be trained and be indoctrinated and washed and all of it. Cool. I get that. That's totally accurate. But without metrics, it's impossible to look back and reconcile to say definitively this was successful or not. Okay. Then the next one is team incentivization. What is your processes to incentivize the team so that obviously you're paying them to do their base work, but when you have the metrics, how do you incentivize them so that when they hit the metrics, they get additional something, whatever that something looks like, and what makes sense for your business model? What can your company actually afford? What is fair and exciting enough, but it's not so indulgent that your team becomes entitled is such a strong word, but that they come to expect that as part of their base pay. What is reading the room based on the economy or the market that you're in? What are your competitors doing that's comparable? This is part of the way that you retain talent too, for however, whatever the duration is that you want them for. And then equally important is a hiring process. You always need to have something set up of how much coverage do you need? So for every 8 people working, we need to have one person that is potentially could be hired because 1 out of 8 of them may churn and we need to replace them quickly. But what are your documented processes around how you ensure that there's a backup plan so that the company is never left stuck if there's churn or there's turnover? If you're a smaller business and you're just starting out and you have a very fractal team, this is just important, period, because if not, you're doing all the work. So how are you consistently hiring, vetting people, putting them through a trial period? What are the metrics, the KPI metrics in the first 90 days that you're testing? What is your onboarding process? Like all of those things are very, very important. And they're tied pretty much with the retention, the incentivization strategies you use to retain your team. And then there is the process of expansion, which everybody loves to talk about and everybody is excited about. So we use this phrase, we call it rubber stamp. So imagine a stamp, a rubber stamp, literally a rubber stamp, okay? I've tried to explain this to my kids a little bit. This was much more prevalent when I was younger, my kids' age than it is for them right now. But imagine a rubber stamp, okay, that you're carving this out or that you're etching this or that you're getting this. What parts of your company, of all the things that you do, these are the bulk of it that's important. There's some other processes that are like sub processes under each category or subcategories under these categories. But of all the things that your company can do, which ones are the ones that are repeatable? Like you could just take the stamp, ink it, put it on the paper, and it would look, every single time you put on the paper, it would look exactly the same design, right? That's the whole process, the philosophy around rubber stamping it. So what is the way that you canonize and solidify and document, and which ones? Because not everything is worth setting in stone. There's a lot of things that are fluid and that will change, that are maybe not even unique to you. Maybe they aren't unique to you, but they're still worth documenting because they're part of your core canon of philosophies and models and processes and the ways that you roll things out and decision making and scenarios and all of this trainings, all of these things. Okay, so what makes it into the rubber stamp model? What could you say? I would repeat this if I opened up this business 4 more times in different ways. I would repeat this process. If I did this offer, for those of you who are in the digital space, if I did 4 more new offers, the things that I would do at the start of every offer is blah. Okay, that's an example of rubber stamp. And there has to be a process around how you manage getting those things into these cannons, how you manage upkeeping it, how you decide what to keep versus what to get rid of, so on and so forth. And then there's the process of how you start something new. So as you're expanding, what do you do? That's like, what do you do in the new thing? Notice this is a 4% of all the things, all of these pieces that contribute to processes that contribute to profit margin. This is the smallest one. And yet I see a lot of times founders get stuck here the most. They are chronically obsessed with the next startup, the next vision idea, the next thing. And that's your strength. That is totally fine. That's amazing. But it's really important for you to know that in order to get there, if you've ever looked at a project and it's like, why wasn't it more successful? Why didn't it hit this thing? Why didn't we achieve the vision? You were probably missing the structure underneath that would have really allowed this to thrive. Okay, so I hope that's helpful. Again, just as a reminder, these percentages are not like percent of your operating budget. It's not percent of the revenue. It's not percent of all tasks you do or all the hours spent. These percentages are just to show like if all of these processes were 100%, what is the weight? What is the importance? What's the significance that each one holds in how they directly, if you wrote this process today, could contribute tomorrow, next week, 2 weeks from now, the next 30 days, the next 90 days to actually shifting the profit margin of your company.